One of the most important things you need to know in Brawl Stars is what brawlers can dish out the most damage in as fast as possible. So their damage per second, DPS. So we're going to put each brawler through 3 different tests. Figure out who has the highest DPS versus 1 robot, 2 robots, and as many robots as possible. Let's freaking do it. All right, now we're gonna start out with the test versus the single robot, the boss robot. But first, I want you to pause the video and make a guess on who you think is gonna win each test. Who's gonna have the highest DPS for each test and who's gonna have the lowest DPS. And let me tell you, it's probably not gonna be what you guess. It's gonna be a different brawler for every single one. So go ahead and make a guess and let's see how correct you are. Also, I had an interesting observation. First of all, if you combine the DPS for any spawnable, like any turret or a bear or Tara Shadow, with the DPS that Brawler does without that spawnable, it's actually going to be lower when you combine them. Those Brawlers actually have a higher DPS without that spawnable, and I think it's because of how the DPS is measured in Training Cave. It seems like the first 2 seconds or so actually have a higher DPS than a lot of other situations. If you're already dealing damage, it sort of doesn't stack in a way, so adding that spawnable actually ends up making it lower. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna tell you the DPS of each spawnable first and foremost, because I also think that's interesting, and then you can make your own observations based on that by itself. So the lowest DPS spawnable, it's actually gonna be Tara's Shadow, which probably isn't too surprising, but interestingly enough, it's actually gonna be 666. Go figure, Tara's Shadow would have a DPS like that. Next up, it's gonna be Penny's Mortar. Fire's too slow, man, so it only does 672 DPS. Overall, pretty low. Next up, it's Nita's Bear at 933 DPS. Not too bad. Jesse's Turret's gonna be the highest of all the spawnables at 1,120 DPS, which is actually pretty solid and getting close, but not quite to the DPS of an actual brawler. All right, and now for the rankings, and don't worry, the new brawler Rosa is included in all of the rankings. And actually, speaking of Rosa and who is bottom of the list for individual brawler DPS, it's gonna be her with 2,488 DPS. Definitely the lowest. Second lowest is gonna be Poco, 2,772. Probably not too surprising. Third, it's going to be Nita with 3,108. Probably also not too surprising. Both those brawlers meant for hitting multiple people. But next in a tie, it's going to be Pam with 3,173. She has a healing super, so okay. Barley, also with the same amount of DPS, hits multiple robots better, so okay, fine. Frank is going to be next with 3,380. Also hits multiple. All right, fine. Same with Jesse up next. 3,444, and as I said, actually has a lower DPS when you combine with the turret. And next is going to be Penny, who has the same thing, 3,528 DPS. Then it's going to be Carl, 3,584. Now, if you could get him closer to a wall, you could probably increase that, but that's what it was in this scenario. 16, it's going to be El Primo, 3,640 DPS. Then it's going to be Mortis, 3,780. And then Bull, 3,818. And I had Bull in his star power mode, so we had double reload. We just got him low with a shooter robot, and that's what it ended up being. Then at 13, it's actually 12, because it's going to be a tie. We're going to have 2 brawlers with 4,200 DPS, both Colt and Jean. Both of these brawlers, turns out Colt, his shots just take a decent amount of time to fire all of them, even though if they all connect, it's a lot of damage, but Jean can just get them out real quick, so they had the same DPS at the end of the day. At 11, it's going to be Tara with 4,788. Tara, a brawler that hits multiple robots, but actually gets her shots out really quickly, so can have an overall high DPS. Next is Brock with a highest DPS of 4,920, and actually he ends up with a higher DPS just firing his normal attack. His super, while it can do a lot of damage, it takes a little bit of time to fire all the rockets, so he doesn't have a higher DPS when he uses that combined with it. At 9, it's going to be Rico with an even 5,000 firing off the wall. Pretty solid. At number 8, This might not be surprising why she's this high, but the method might be. It's going to be Piper with 5,040 DPS, and actually that comes straight from her super. Her super, if all the grenades land, can now dish out a ton of damage, so definitely beware of her super nowadays. All right, at number 6, actually number 7, let's not skip that one. It's going to be Leon, even though I almost didn't see him. Oh, what a surprise. 5,212 DPS. High individual damage dealer, not too surprising. At number 6, though, this one might be kind of surprising. It's going to be Bo. Bo, if you have his Minds Connect and his normal attack, can dish out a ton of damage at once. 6,130 DPS, really, really solid. All right, now we're in the top 5. At number 5, it's going to be Daryl with 3,672 DPS. And using his super, it did not make it any better, not much damage. It was too slow, but if all his shots connect, he can do a ton of damage. The trick is, of course, just getting all of those shots to connect. But versus the boss robot, that's pretty easy. At number 4, it's going to be Dynamite with 7,056 DPS. Dynamite high damage dealer, but he also does high area damage, so we'll have to see how that goes in later tests. Now, we're in the top 3, and these top 3 are far and away better than everyone else, and it is not close. We're getting into the triple digits, baby. At number 3, it's going to be Shelly, the super stacker, with 10,164 DPS. If you're an El Primo, bye-bye, because you got 1 second to live, essentially, with that super stacking. So you do not want to deal with a Shelly in close range. We all know that already, though. At number 2, it's another super stacker, Crow, with 10,521 DPS. Also insane versus the boss robot, just super after super. At number 1, if you didn't guess it, it's going to be Spike. If all those spikes connect, Spike is an insane damage dealer with 12,096 DPS. Incredibly high. And also, this actually is a higher DPS without using his super. If you use his super, turns out he ends up with a lower DPS, I think because of the thing I was talking about earlier and how they measure DPS in Training Cave. But Spike is going to be number 1 versus just 1 robot. Let's see how the next test versus 2 robots goes. Now in the second test, every brawler had to face off versus 2 robots and try and get the highest DPS as possible. Another scenario very likely to happen in a real Brawl game. So you're going to want to know who does the most damage in this scenario. And actually, it's probably going to surprise you who the lowest and the highest are. The highest maybe not entirely surprising, but there might be some other brawlers up there that are a little bit. But at the lowest, at 25, it's going to be Barley. And in this test, he couldn't hit both brawlers at once with his attack, so he did pretty bad, actually. With 3,006 DPS, Barley was definitely the lowest, although Pam at 24 was next lowest with 3,020 DPS. Poor Pam, always so low, even though she's apparently so strong. At 23, it's going to be El Primo with 3,064. He couldn't hit 2 robots at once, so that's just how it is. 22, it's going to be Brock, 3,153. 21, it's going to be Crow, who was number 2 in the last test, now versus 2 robots, not nearly the same, with 3,531 DPS. At 20, it's going to be Mortis, 3,780. At 19, it's going to be Jean with the same DPS as the prior test, 4,200. Then it's going to be Leon, 4,312, a little bit lower than the last one because these robots didn't have as much health, so we couldn't stack out that damage. At 17, who was in our top 5, actually this is a tie, it's going to be Daryl, same DPS as Leon, again, couldn't stack out that damage versus a lower health robot. At 16, it's going to be Carl, 4,368. He could use the walls a little bit. An attack combined with a super got him a pretty solid DPS, a little better than prior. 15, it's going to be Bull, again with star power, 4,480. Then it's going to be Poco. Poco definitely higher, hitting 2 robots, 4,620, but still not insanely high. He's not a very high damage per shot brawler. At 13, it's going to be Bo, 4,704. Couldn't quite get the same crazy amount in a burst as earlier, not too surprising. At 12, it's going to be Dynamite, and he had almost 5,000, 4,928 DPS, not able to hit both brawlers really well at the same time, so that's what he's going to end up with. Piper at number 11, 5,040, same as earlier, just hitting all of those grenades at once is crazy high damage. Now at number 10, this was the prior number 1 in the last challenge. It's going to be Spike with 5,152 DPS. Still a respectably very high DPS, but not the insane one he had earlier. At number 9, it's going to be Shelly with 5,236. All these individual brawlers not doing quite as well in the 2 brawler rankings. So who's going to be number 1? At number 8, it's going to be Jessie, 5,264. Not surprising, Jessie is a lot better versus 2 robots than versus 1. 7, it's going to be the new brawler Rosa with 5,376 DPS. She can hit both robots at once, so definitely a solid challenge for her. At number 6, it's going to be Nita, combined with her bear. In this case, it worked out. 5,740 DPS, pretty dang solid. Now we're in the top 5, and number 5, it's going to be Penny with her star effect, not her star effect, her coin effect. Does 6,384. Makes sense. Penny can just hit a lot of damage with that coin effect, but that obviously doesn't work versus 1 robot in the prior test. So now at number 4, we have Frank, another multiple robot hitter, 6,720. And now for the top 3, and let's see if you can guess these exactly. At number 3, it's going to be Rico with 7,500 DPS. Not too surprising, he can hit both robots at the same time with his super, so it's gonna be pretty dang high, you would think. And similar vein, number 2 is gonna be Colt, also hitting both robots at the same time. Slightly better DPS, 7,560. And now number 1 for hitting 2 robots at the same time, it's going to be Tara with a respectably high 8,092 DPS. Not nearly the same DPS versus the individual robot that we saw earlier with some other brawlers, but hitting 2 at the same time is a harder challenge for a lot of different brawlers. So in this case, Tara is going to be your winner, probably not too surprising with her super. All right, now for the most fun test and ranking of all, who can hit as many robots as possible and get the highest DPS. There's some crazy results, crazy methods to get this to happen, and I think the whole thing is going to be surprising. Although at number 25, by God, if this was a tier list, this probably would, I guess, be F tier because they're at the near the bottom every single time. It's Pam. The S tier brawler normally is in this ranking horrible DPS wise with 3,024. Not surprising she doesn't do any better though versus a lot of robots. She doesn't really have any special abilities that makes her better in that regard. She's the healer. At 24, it's going to be Jean, 4,020, not surprising. 23, it's going to be Daryl, 4,480. 22, it's going to be Leon, 4,869. Not surprising. Bull with star power, 7,466. Here you're seeing this DPS is already starting to get pretty high, but here they are facing a ton of robots at once. At 20, it's going to be El Primo, who's just jumping around, is going to go crazy, and he's going to have 7,910 DPS. Now, this brawler you might think would be better because of how he did in the first competition. At 19, it's going to be Crow. Even though he can jump around all the time with his super, he doesn't actually have, I mean, it's 7,962 damage per second, which is a lot of damage per second, but it only gets him at number 19 on this ranking. So let's keep going. At 18, it's going to be Colt, 7,980. At 17, it's going to be Jessie, who can hit multiple robots, but not a ton at once, 8,372 DPS. Then it's going to be Bo, 8,760. And then Carl, 9,856. We're starting to get to 10,000. At Rico, it's going to be the last one under 10,000. At 14, 9,880. Everything else is above 10,000. At 13, it's going to be Shelly with the super stacking. 11,827 DPS for Shelly. It's starting to get crazy, crazy high. At 12, it's going to be Penny with her coin effect, does 12,936 DPS. At 11, it's going to be Brock, and this is where his super's finally useful again, 13,104 DPS. Now at number 10, it's another high individual guy. It's going to be Spike with 13,338 DPS. A lot of threes in that. Spike, look, he's still top 10 in this case. And it's actually pretty similar DPS to earlier, so I guess it makes sense. At number 9, it's going to be the new brawler, Rosa, 14,112 DPS. She can really dish it out when there's a lot of people to hit. At number 8, it's going to be Nita, 15,064 damage per second. Good Lord, try and withstand that, but just wait. It keeps on going higher. At number 7, it's gonna be Piper, the grenades, man. 15,120 DPS, crazy high. At number 6, this one is probably not surprising at all. It's gonna be Barley, 17,136. I'm sure everyone expected Brawler to be high in this list, right? And now at number 5, finally his time to shine. It's Poco, 17,556. This is definitely the test for him. He can hit a lot of robots at once, so not too surprising. At number 4, it's going to be Mortis with a ton of supers and some normal attacks. And actually, this is going to be a tie, so it's really tied for 3rd with Frank, and they both have a DPS of over 20,000. 20,160 DPS. Crazy high. Now we're in the top 2. See if you can figure it out. I'll give you a moment here. Of course, there's only 2 left, though, so it's maybe not too hard. At number 2, it's going to be Tara with her super and her area attack. No surprise, she's pretty dang high with 23,604 DPS. Now the number 1 brawler is head and shoulders above everyone else. It is just insane. He does so much DPS. You would die in the blink of a second versus this sort of DPS. It's gonna be Dynamite with 30,912 damage per second with his normal tactic combined with his super. He just dishes out the damage at an insanely high rate. He can hit so many robots at once. Dynamite is the king of hitting multiple robots at once and dishing out as much damage as possible in a shorter time. Let me know how close your guesses were, but if you want to see other great ranking videos to help you improve at Brawlers, check them out right over there. That's gonna be it for today's video though. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.